Okay, so hey guys, we're here again, and we actually have both of BTA's founders today for the first time ever on LinkedIn Live. Today, our topic is IT architecture, tales from the trenches. You both have seen so much, not only over the entire course of your technology careers, but specifically and more recently at BTA. Ken, why don't we quickly intro David for anyone who is newer to the series and dive into some of the hairier situations you guys have dealt with and how BTA kind of saved the day.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Saving the day is all relative. When we founded BTA 12 going on 13 years ago, our goal was to reduce chaos for customers and prevent the diving catch, save the day kind of engagements. But you never seem to run out of those. So we seem to keep those. We have a number of those a year still.
It keeps our skills sharp.
Yeah, it's the only way you stay relevant. But like Jen said, Dick Buechner, my co-founder here at BTA, he's our CTO, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So at BTA, what that means is Dave is first and foremost an architect. He's a practicing architect. He works daily with customers, and he's got over 30 years of experience in large enterprises to small enterprises, across finance, media, insurance, utilities, public sector customers. The other part of that is being a co-founder. He also gets to lead our service delivery team because, everybody does a little bit of everything here. But it's how we stay sharp. But what that means to us is, we have a very well-defined project management office and a number of great technical teams on the data center, security, and overall infrastructure sides. And these teams, Dave has hired, mentored, leads these guys in architecture engagements, design engagements, and we can talk about the difference between architecture and design if we really wanted to go down a rabbit hole. But and these are anything from automation, remediation, operations, and it could be project based. We also have managed services that we drive. It was just good to get Dave on here and chat about what are some of the key things that we've learned from our customers. And for those of you that have seen probably our original YouTube video from like 9 years ago, we talked about architecture as a team sport. And Dave, I'll throw it to you. Is from what we talked about architecture as a team sport 9-10 years ago, I haven't seen a lot of material change, but
it's still true. I mean, the technology changes, but a lot of the problems that come with managing the technologies and managing the complexity, if anything, they've gotten a little bit bigger. And so that team sport concept's actually as relevant today as when we cooked it up a decade ago.
Yeah. And, and I think Dave and I both come from very team-oriented backgrounds. I was a Marine for 13 years. Dave's a Georgia Tech grad and spent a lot of time at Georgia Tech running the mainframe. You want to talk a little bit about the mainframe, Dave?
Yeah. So, back in the day when I had black hair, I actually started my IT career as an IBM mainframe systems programmer, and ended up managing the IBM support group at the time at Georgia Tech. So I got a little bit of team leadership kind of experience there. It's interesting if you look at what we were doing back when I started and look at how technology gets deployed today, there's a lot less predefined architecture that comes from the vendors. And so we've actually, I think, gotten into a situation where the architecture side of things is more relevant for people who are installing the technology than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads us to the conversation about, why do you guys call yourself business technology architects?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think about our naming conversations, and it's kind of scary that two kind of geeks or we're naming the company, but I think we came up with something that captures something important. Businesses are in business to do something. That's the business part of it. And when you're working with a business, that's the first thing that you have to look at is what does the business do? Most of the time these days, that means that the business is going to deploy some technology to help them do whatever it is they do. And that technology takes a lot of different roles or a lot of different forms, fulfills a lot of different functions, and it's way beyond what it used to do. I mean, it used to be just the financial system. Now everything is hosted on IT. And so, what technologies are we going to use for that business to do its thing? And then, how you put all those technologies together in a way that's going to work for your organization to make your mission go. That's where we get into the architecture piece. How do we take all these different solutions? We've got lots of great capabilities in the IT industry, lots of options in the IT industry, but how do you pick and choose them in such a way that they all work together in a way that one group doesn't hurt another group and that everything actually works?
And we've seen our share of painting yourself into a corner, or one group making a decision that causes another group to have to re-architect, redesign, or completely redeploy some things sometimes.
Yeah.
And so why don't we get to the meat of this? We wanted to share some, the tales from the trenches. What are the kinds of things that we see today? What are the kind of business problems that customers have, and how do we help them solve those problems? And I know we've done a lot of work with a very large federal public sector organization with a global reach. And what did we learn working with this customer? Through an assessment and actually helping them get an architecture in place.
Well, so one of the things that that there's a joke that's prevalent in IT these days. Everybody has a test environment. Some people are lucky enough they have a separate production environment. Architecture documentation is a little bit like that. There's an architecture. Every infrastructure that gets built has an architecture. The question is whether it was defined up front and documented in such a way that people understand what that architecture really is. And in the case of this particular public sector client, there's not only been all the changes that happen in normal public sector, but public sector, like private sector, is going through some major transitions in how they deliver services. One of which, in the case of this particular agency, that's really important is moving out to cloud. And so they're trying to move from on-prem data centers, move stuff out to cloud. And there's obviously a network component to that. From a business perspective, it's an obvious use case. There's lots of good reasons to go to cloud. From a network architecture perspective, especially because the architecture wasn't defined and documented, how to fit that use case in with the current architecture was kind of a little bit of a hit or miss, a little bit of a we're gonna do some things that we need for this project, but then there's unintended consequences that cause us problems with other things that are operational that then slows down the whole respond to move into the cloud. And so one of the things that we've been able to do and are in the process of doing is helping the organization define the architecture and then define how you go from the high level technical decision-making definition of architecture and provide guidance to the people that are doing engineering for individual implementations in a way that things can get built that work together, that are consistent, that somebody's not going to make a decision in the heat of the moment in one part of the network that's then going to make something more difficult in the future or make something break in another part of the network.
What kind of impact does that have on availability?
Well, it's a huge impact on availability. And the issue becomes and there's two parts to that. One is that any new use case is going to potentially change some of the availability requirements, right? And in this particular case, when you're talking about data center to cloud, one of the key things is you're talking about moving a site that provides service to everybody that your business or in this case the public sector organization provides support for. And so everybody on the public side of things, everybody internally who works for the federal government, partner agencies, all those kind of things, instead of coming to one location in the network, are now going to a different location in the network, which means that we need to move some of the availability kind of things that we've done to a different part of the network. And if you're not architected in such a way that you can add a new site to the network like that, or move a site on the network like that, then you end up with those situations in which you impact availability, not because we're trying to take things down, but because there's an unintended consequence that something that you do that makes sense in the process of a particular project causes something in another part of the network because we don't have a defined way of thinking about it.
Yeah, no, and that kind of leads into a financial services customer that we've done a lot of work with, and again, it's a global financial services organization. What kind of problems did we, what kind of problems were they experiencing, and how do we approach helping them solve that?
Well, so the particular financial services company that you're thinking about had, number one, gone through some explosive growth,
Right.
and so they had, like everybody that stands up something new, they had a new innovative product. They stood something up. They did it as quickly as possible. All those kind of things. There's a point at which it's grown past the original what you're looking at, and here again, part of the issue is there was an architecture and in this case there were even some thoughts about architecture, but the architectural process hadn't gotten to the point where we had a consistent architecture that could be followed over time. And so you ended up with different parts of the network behaving different ways. One of the things that they ended up with is it didn't cause operational aspects or operational problems as long as everything was up. But what it did leave is this a little bit of a time bomb in that when there was a failure of particular components, the network wasn't consistently architected in a way that it recovered well. And
Right.
so they had what was originally a hardware failure, which caused a disturbance in the force that wasn't expected. So they did the thing that you do in an outage window, quick, get everything up and running. But then the problem was to fix the hardware problem. They ended up realizing we don't know how we're going to maintain the network and not recreate the problem that we just had. And unfortunately, what happened is it slowed down their problem resolution long enough that the problem actually did cause a significantly long outage, and was pretty costly. And so one of the things that we did, we'd had a relationship with this customer for a while. We'd done some architectural work, so we knew something about their network. We also knew some specifics about the products involved, and we were able to get in and just, everybody was in that firefighting mode. So part of our role was to say, okay, tell us what the failure is. Now, just give me 20 minutes and let me step back and look at a couple things and ask a couple questions and build a model and, essentially build a kind of a real-time architectural view of the failure mode that we were in so that then we could figure out how to get out of it. And then part of what came out of that was an effort to do a better job of defining the architecture going forward so that it could be consistent throughout all their infrastructure so that the availability and maintainability was better.
Okay, great. And, I guess the thing I would ask about a lot of this is how much of this is philosophically driven, and the product selection is somewhat a moot point, but there are still good principles that we follow. Is that, it's not like to make good architecture, you have to go buy all new stuff.
No, as a
Is that
matter of fact, you can have good architecture with anything that's supportable, really.
Yeah,
And vendor salespeople wouldn't like me saying it, but there are a lot of vendors out there with good quality products, right? But the fact
yeah,
of the matter is that um, in a modern data center or a modern WAN, any of these environments with the sufficient complexity that we've got now, there's
mhm,
multiple layers of things that interact, sometimes automatically. And if those things are not deployed in such a way that they're all going to make the same decision, then you end
right,
up parts of the infrastructure that don't converge well when other things happen. And creating that consistent mental model and that consistent documentation of how all of these different technical infrastructure pieces are going to behave um, is what a good architecture is about. And
right,
and part of the idea with good architecture is getting to the point where you can say, I've got an architecture that then I can design new use cases to,
right,
or sometimes I'll look to new use cases and say, okay, this is far enough out of what we've done before that I need to evaluate it as an add-on to the architecture, but I don't have to start from ground zero. And I have a better chance of not breaking things that are already there because I know the rules of the road.
yeah, yeah. And I know we worked with a large media company. We worked with them for a number of years, but particularly during COVID, they had to send a significant number of people home to work, and they weren't
Yeah.
really architected for that. You
Oh,
want to talk
yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, talk about use cases uh, that nobody knew about, right? I mean, so every business has the use case where somebody plugs something into the network that somebody didn't know about and it does whatever, right? But
Yep.
COVID was a perfect example of the potential pitfalls of having an architecture that's not well defined. The big thing with COVID and with everybody going home is you go from, average number of VPN in users is like 100 a day, and now it goes to thousands a day, sometimes thousands concurrently. Now, part of the problem or that has to be solved is I now have got VPN devices that need to be scaled. But the other
Right.
thing that we discovered is that with the media company is that a lot of the business uses that they made of the network weren't supported by where the VPN concentrators were in the network. And
Right.
so not only was it a matter of scaling up so everybody could get into the network, but then it was, I've now got a user hanging off a VPN concentrator that needs to get to something that we're not architected to get to. And so it got to be it was a kind of a all day, every day, 3-4 week effort when COVID started to just get them to the point where when management finally said, yep, we're working 100% from home, that we were ready.
Yeah. No, and that's the exciting thing is that I like to say there are no training and no architectural emergencies, but sometimes there are.
Every now and then, every now and then. I mean, I've always said my crystal ball's in the shop, so my ability to predict the future is not great. Um,
Uh,
Even with a good architecture, there's going to be stuff that's going to come up that we didn't think about, like COVID. Fortunately, now the architectural work that we're doing is planning for that kind of stuff. But
right.
here
It's
again, being able to add something onto the network in a hurry or any other part of the infrastructure is a whole lot easier if you already have a defined architecture.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're getting close to, we try to keep these right around 20 minutes, and we're going to go over that today. I can pretty much tell you. But let's try to bring this in for a landing.
Absolutely.
From I think kind of some of the key points I've taken away from this, and that we, in general, I think fundamentally apply in how we approach all of our the work that we do with customers. We have a service delivery methodology, and it's very architecturally driven because we don't you can't go execute on deploying something if you don't know where it fits in from an architectural perspective.
Yeah, some other LinkedIn Live, I'll have to go through the Stargate analogy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and we probably don't have time for that.
Yeah, I was looking at
yeah, but kind of final question, and I know what I would say about this, but I'd be interested in what you have to say about this because I've got a technical background, but I've really been more on the sales side of things for many years. But why would a customer need BTA if they're already working with your typical VAR reseller partner or the manufacturers? What's the value that BTA brings in these engagements?
I think fundamentally our approach starts at the other end of the equation. And I think it goes back to the discussion of why we're named what we are, right?
Yeah.
We started the business. We started the use cases. If you look at our delivery model, use cases is early on in the delivery for a reason, because it's the use cases that allow us to build the architecture that's going to apply the technology in a way that's going to work for that organization.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I respect the work that others in IT do, one of the things I think we've got is a real solid niche where we think about things architecturally in a way that isn't everybody else's focus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. And I'm gonna wind this up. We're well over our 20 minutes. This has been fun. We're gonna have to do this. Maybe we can do this. Maybe you and I should just do this once a month and talk about things. And
yeah, we should. And I apologize. It's taken me so long to get on the calendar.
Well, you're a busy man, and it's kind of we operate like a law firm. Everybody bills.
Absolutely.
So, but thanks for joining us. Jen, are there any questions out there from the audience at all, or?
The question was really, why that I've heard over and over is, why, if we already have a VAR, a reseller partner, why would we go with BTA? And I think we've already
we just covered that one. Yeah. So
I think we're a good complement to a VAR or a partner. And then I think that's true on both the customer side and the VAR side. But we have a perspective.
Yeah, and we've built our business on partnering with partners. We don't have a huge sales organization, and we work very closely with partners and a number of different manufacturers. But we invite anybody to reach out to us, and gobta.com. Just click the contact us button, and you'll be able to get to us. But thanks again, everybody, for joining the LinkedIn Live, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks to you guys.
Thanks, everyone.